That black janitor's son accomplished what all the doctors in the hospital could not. In a place where brilliance wore white coats and authority carried stethoscopes, their knowledge fell short before the frailty of life. The billionaire lay pale and broken, his empire hanging by a thread, as the sharpest minds in medicine stood defeated. Machines screamed warnings, charts told stories of failure, and every whispered consultation ended with the same dreadful truth: nothing more could be done. These were men and women trained at the finest institutions, celebrated for their mastery, yet in this room of power and despair, they were helpless. Hope was vanishing with every shallow breath. But in the corner, unseen, stood a child no one respected. No one believed capable of greatness. A janitor's son, young, quiet, different. And though the world dismissed him, inside his mind burned an intelligence so rare it would soon challenge everything. The doctors whispered among themselves, searching desperately for answers that would not come. Every second was slipping through their fingers, dragging the billionaire closer to death. His fortune, his empire, his power. None of it mattered now. In that sterile white room, stripped of pride and privilege, he was nothing more than a man fighting for his last breath. And the so-called experts, armed with degrees, awards, and reputations, stood powerless. But while they surrendered to failure, the janitor's son refused to look away. His dark eyes burned with a focus that few had ever seen, scanning every detail, every monitor, every flaw in their process. Where the doctors saw an ending, he saw a beginning. Where they found impossibility, he saw a path. No one noticed him. No one believed him. Yet in his silence, he carried the spark of an answer that could rewrite destiny. At first, no one heard him. His voice was quiet, almost swallowed by the storm of panic that filled the hospital ward. But when the janitor's son spoke again, sharper, stronger, every head turned. The boy pointed to the failing machines, his words cutting through doubt like lightning through the dark. "You're missing it," he declared. The doctors frowned, scoffing at the audacity. How could a child see what their years of mastery could not? Yet in that instant, the monitors shifted, proving his warning true. Alarms screamed. Nurses rushed. The billionaire's life was measured in seconds, and the doctors' faces drained of color. Silence pressed heavy against the room, as if fate itself waited to see if they would listen. And standing in their shadow, the janitor's son refused to back down. He wasn't asking for permission. He was demanding to be heard. The doctors surrounded the boy, their coats like walls of authority. One leaned down, sneering, "You think you know more than us?" But the janitor's son didn't flinch. His eyes locked on the billionaire, every second etched into his mind like fire. "You're treating the wrong problem," he said firmly, his small hands sketching shapes in the air, pointing to details no one else dared to notice. At first, laughter rippled through the room, arrogant, dismissive, yet their smirks faltered as his words matched the numbers, flashing on the screens with terrifying precision. A hidden rhythm, a mistake buried beneath their expertise. The boy had unraveled it in moments. The lead surgeon froze, his pride crumbling into shock. The billionaire's breath hitched, hanging by a thread, and suddenly every eye turned to the child they had mocked. In that silence, a choice thundered over them all: ignore him, or let him save the man no one else could. The billionaire's pulse flickered weakly, fading like a candle in the wind. Machines screamed warnings, doctors scrambled, but none dared to move. All eyes were on the boy, the janitor's son, who stood small, yet unshaken, in the storm of panic. His voice cut through the chaos. "If you keep following the charts, he'll die. But if you follow this..." He pointed with trembling hands to a sequence of irregularities on the monitor, lines only he could see for what they truly were. A hidden pattern, a silent cry for help. The doctors hesitated, pride warring with fear. Could they really trust a child? Seconds bled away. The boy took a step forward, his words stronger now. "You've tried everything. You failed. Let me try." The room froze. The janitor's son had crossed the line from observer to savior, his courage defying every boundary. And in that fragile instant, the impossible seemed closer than ever before. The boy's small fingers hovered over the machine, his mind racing faster than any heartbeat in the room. Numbers, rhythms, and signals. What the doctor saw as chaos, he saw as code, a puzzle only he could unlock. He whispered to himself, calculations flowing like poetry, then looked up with unshakable clarity. "You're treating the wrong failure," he said. Gasps rippled across the room, but he didn't flinch. With precision, he adjusted the dials, redirected the flow, and recalibrated the machine's rhythm. Alarms that once screamed in despair began to steady, as if the very heart of the billionaire was answering his call. The lead surgeon stepped closer, eyes wide with disbelief, watching a child do what years of training had failed to accomplish. Around them, silence replaced panic. For the first time that night, hope surged through the room. Not because of medicine, not because of money, but because of a janitor's son who refused to let brilliance be ignored. The monitor stuttered, a cruel reminder that time was almost gone. Doctors clutched their instruments, frozen between awe and fear as the boy pressed forward. His voice trembled, yet his conviction roared louder than any alarm. "Trust me," he whispered, not as a plea, but as a command. The billionaire's chest faltered, the line on the screen threatening to flatten forever. Executives outside the glass window buried their faces in their hands, certain they were watching the end. But inside, the janitor's son stood unshaken, eyes locked on the storm before him. With a final adjustment, he drove the machine into harmony with the patient's failing body. Silence gripped the room so tight it felt like the world had stopped spinning. Then, against every expectation, a sound broke through. The faint but steady rhythm of life returning. A heartbeat. A miracle not written by science or wealth, but by the genius no one believed in. At first, no one dared breathe. The monitors pulsed, slow but steady, each beat echoing like thunder in a storm that had finally broken. The billionaire's chest rose, shallow, fragile, yet alive. Doctors staggered back, their polished degrees and decades of study trembling beneath the weight of what they had just witnessed. One whispered, This isn't possible." Another gripped the edge of the bed, unable to comprehend how a boy, just a janitor's son, had done what an entire team of experts could not. Their pride cracked, giving way to something rarer than knowledge: respect. Beyond the glass, the executives lifted their heads, their despair dissolving into stunned silence. All eyes turned to the boy, who stood still, his small hands trembling but his gaze unbroken. He had crossed the line between impossible and real, and in that moment the world understood. Genius wears no uniform, and greatness waits for no permission. The boy's breath shook as he stepped back, his knees weak, yet his heart steady. Then the door creaked open. A man in faded overalls, his hands scarred from years of labor, entered quietly. The janitor, the boy's father. His eyes widened as he saw the scene before him. Doctors speechless, executives frozen, and his son standing where legends are made. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Pride welled in his chest, too heavy to contain, tears gathering as he whispered, "That's my boy." The CEO, once untouchable, bowed his head in shame, realizing that power had been humbled by truth. The doctor stepped aside, clearing a path not for authority, not for wealth, but for respect. And in that fragile silence, father and son locked eyes. No words were needed. The janitor's son had carried not just knowledge into that room, but every lesson his father had given him: strength, dignity, and the courage to rise when others fall. The room erupted in stunned applause, but none of it mattered to the boy. He wasn't seeking fame, wealth, or glory. He turned, walking toward the man in overalls, the janitor who had given him everything that truly mattered. And as he reached his father, the boy placed a trembling hand in his, quietly, simply with the dignity of a king. The billionaire, once the center of the world, lay saved not by doctors, not by power, but by the brilliance of a janitor's son. Reporters would call it a miracle. Executives would label it genius, but the truth was deeper. Greatness had never worn a suit. It had walked the halls in silence, unnoticed, carrying a mop and a dream. That night, a legend was not born, it was revealed. And with it, the world was forced to remember. Never underestimate the overlooked. Because sometimes, the hands that clean the floors are the same hands that can change destiny itself.